Bruce Boudreau has exposed Jimmy Rutherford and the Canucks management. Now, at the time of this recording, it is a little after 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, April the 5th. I'm pre-recording this video to come out a little bit later, most in part so you guys have some content for when you guys wake up, although this story came out yesterday, and of course, all the good Canucks stories, or at least juicy ones, come out when I'm either A, out and about, or B, I'm at work. Just my luck. But that's why I'm doing this now. I want to get my opinion on this, and I want to talk about this juicy story because, yeah, Bruce Boudreau exposed Jimmy Rutherford and the type of guy he is and how he negotiates. So let's go ahead and dive into this article. I'm going to take snippets of it. I'm not going to share the screen and show you the entire article or read the entire thing. I just want to point out some key points. So once again, I'll leave the link to the article in the description down below, and you guys can check it out for yourselves. But it is on Daily Hive. But let's go ahead and dive right into this because I'm ready to talk about it. So the first one. Basically, it starts off by going, Bruce Boudreau didn't mince words when talking about Vancouver Canucks management today, technically yesterday. The former Canucks coach spoke honestly about the current management regime's negotiation tactics. Alvin and Rutherford took over in January 2022 when Boudreau was already with the club, having been hired a month before. The eventual divorce between the two sides was messy, with fans chanting Boudreau's name and the coach being forced to stick behind the bench long after it was known he would be fired. Now, I talked about this specific moment in a previous video, and I gave you my opinion on it. My opinion has not changed on the whole Boudreau saga and how this Canucks management group dealt with that. I mentioned in said video, which you can find just up here. I will leave a link to it above. So if you guys want to check that video out, you guys can go ahead and do it. But basically, I mentioned that exact game where it was Bruce Boudreau's last game behind the bench, and the fans started chanting, Bruce, there it is. And you saw how emotional Boudreau got. I admitted in that same video that I myself, watching the end of that game, got choked up because of just how powerful that moment was. And I had a lot of sympathy for Bruce Boudreau. I made it known in, once again, that same video that I absolutely loved Bruce Boudreau as a coach. I loved his personality. I loved his honesty and his humor as well. Not to mention, I'm a big WWE fan, and so is Bruce Boudreau. Matter of fact, we saw an interaction between him and Kevin Owens at the draft a number of years ago. And I thought that was super awesome, super cool. But moving back to this article, before that saga happened, Boudreau and the Canucks agreed for him to coach the 23-24 season on a mutual option. Both sides reportedly had an opt-out clause, but they agreed that Boudreau should return behind the bench. It's not a dissimilar situation to the one the Canucks are currently going through with Rick Tocchet. Tocchett's contract has a team option for next season, and the club is reportedly ready to use it. Per a recent report by Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman, that tidbit has ramped up public discussion of Tocchet's contract situation. Now, before I move on to the next part of this article and the real juicy part, I just want to say, as you'll notice it in further along into this article, basically Boudreau talks about how Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin go public with these kinds of things. And, we've already seen it earlier this year. We've seen it with the Pedersen and Miller situation and the rift between the two. Do you think Pedersen or Miller, said something, said that to the media? Like basically, gave the media those little deets? Where do you think that whole thing, hearing about it started from? Started from the top. So clearly that information was leaked to the media by who? Someone within the organization wanted this to be public knowledge. So I just wanted to point that out, maybe really get people thinking about that, because I don't think a whole lot of people have thought about it from that perspective. But let's move on to the juicy part of this article. And it's Boudreau's quote. And it goes as such. Boudreau is quoted as saying, "I can see how Vancouver management works there. They did the same thing to me when they wanted me to sign my deal," Boudreau said on Sirius XM radio yesterday morning. They put it public. They start to say, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to do this, and stuff like that. As soon as I heard the Rick Tocchet situation, I know exactly what Jim is doing here, and it's almost bullying him into signing the deal. So that right there is Bruce Boudreau exposing Jim Rutherford as a bully. That's plain and simple right there. Jim Rutherford's negotiating tactic is to bully. Think about that for a second. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of getting a little, jacked up about this, because it most certainly paints Jim Rutherford to me in a different light. Don't get me wrong, I have liked some of the moves he's made to try and help better this team, but this I do not like. If you guys remember earlier this year, actually, give me one quick second. Actually, if you guys remember earlier this year, something not too similar to this happened. Not to this degree, but this isn't the first time we've heard bullying or some form of bullying happen in the NHL this year when it comes to a management group. Do you guys remember Jacob Trouba of the New York Rangers? He was essentially bullied out of New York. Now, the Rangers GM Chris Drury basically told Trouba, we want to trade you. We want you to waive your no trade clause so we can trade you. And Trouba said no, because he didn't want to leave New York. He was happy with being in New York. I believe it had something to do with his wife, and I believe it was like her medical practice or something to do with like her career. And that's why he didn't want to move from New York. He was wanting to stay because he wanted to do it for his wife and her career. He didn't want that to affect her career. So what does Chris Drury do? Well, he essentially bullies Trouba and threatens to put him on waivers if he does not waive his no trade clause. So basically, Chris Drury is saying, if you're not going to waive your no trade, we're going to waive you, and any team can basically sign you. They can bring you in, and you're not going to have a choice with where you go. If you waive your no trade clause, you will have a choice. That is essentially what Chris Drury did. So I see a little some similarities with this whole tactic, but that's just one example of bullying in the NHL this season, at least. But let's move on to the second part of his quote. This was the juicy part. Let's look at what he says afterwards. All of a sudden, you get threatened. You better sign it or we're not going to do this. You better sign it or we're not going to do that. Me, I wasn't negotiating with any other teams or anything, but I panicked and said, okay, I'm going to sign it right now. I just see the same sort of happening with Rick, but I think Rick is in a much, much stronger position than I ever was. I think he'll do whatever he feels he has to do for himself. So that's the article. Let me just get back to screen here. There we go. So yeah, that's the quote and the article. But yeah, Bruce Boudreau for essentially exposed Jim Rutherford as a bully. That is apparently Jim Rutherford's negotiating tactic. Now, we haven't seen that when it comes. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Do you guys remember last year, like before Elias Pettersson signed that extension? They did the same thing to Elias Pettersson. They essentially said, if you don't sign this extension, we're going to trade you. So that is Jim Rutherford's tactic when he's not able to negotiate or sign someone, or if someone's not, signing an extension like that, he bullies them. He threatens them. That to me is not a good president of hockey operations. That's not a good way to go about things. I mean, we don't know the behind the scenes stuff when it comes to Brock Besser. We don't know. I mean, we've heard it's been messy with Besser, with Alvin's quotes post deadline about Besser. It's not completely bullying, I would say, but it goes along that route when it comes to, the fact that Besser turns down that 5-year, $8 million offer. And then Alvin goes and says what he says about Besser, who's been absolutely loyal to this Vancouver Canucks team for years now. He's the longest tenured Canuck on the team right now. And he's been absolutely loyal to the team. He doesn't deserve that. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of sick to my stomach reading these quotes from Bruce Boudreau. Like, it's disgusting to see. But I want to know what your guys' thoughts are on these quotes from Bruce Boudreau. What are your guys' thoughts on, him essentially exposing Jim Rutherford as a bully? Does this paint a bad picture for Jim Rutherford, for the future? And are people going to be looking at him differently because of this? I also want to know what your guys' thoughts are when he essentially said they make this public. That I believe that quote wasn't in this. Actually, no, wait, yes, it was. But he basically said they make things public so it gets out there so people can start talking about it. I go back to what I mentioned about Pettersson and Miller and that whole rift thing. Again, how do you think that got out? I mean, Rutherford talked about it in that interview, basically admitting that there was something. Why do you think he did that interview? He didn't do it to save face for himself. And granted, at that time, people already knew about it. But again, I ask the question, how do you think that got out? It wasn't Pettersson and it wasn't Miller who, let that, cat out of the bag. Somebody within the organization leaked that out to the media so people could talk about it. So if you really think about it, Canucks are responsible for that whole drama for this season. People are trying to point fingers at who's to blame. Pettersson's to blame, Miller's to blame, management's to blame. Pettersson's struggles is to blame. Miller being, for lack of a better term, an a-hole towards PD is to blame. No, whoever leaked that to the media is to blame. So essentially, the Canucks are to blame for this whole drama riddled season, if you really think about it, and if you really put the pieces together. So once again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Just want to let you guys know there will be no live stream today for the Canucks versus Ducks game. I'm actually going to be at the game, so that will be why. But I do have some goodies for you guys for while I'm at the game. I'm actually going to do a game vlog while I'm there. And as I said, I got some surprises for you guys, so stay tuned for that. And I'll see you guys in the next video.